Great. Okay. So as you know, we created this program after the legislative session in 2021, and we've been working hard to make modifications here and there, and many of you have been working through at least 5 election reviews. So we're continuing to learn and adjust together. And we've seen some of the issues that trip people up and some of the easier parts of the process. And it's a good time for us to renew our expectations for reviews and get an opportunity to hear from someone in the field who is a professional translator. Plus, we're welcoming 2 new members, as we heard, and this will be their first time to get any training about reviews, which begin next week for some of you. Today's presentation is meant to be interactive. At certain points, you will have a chance to respond to polls and put your ideas in the chat. And we also know that everyone learns a little bit differently, and we're all from different cultures and educational backgrounds. Maybe more formal student-teacher roles have been in your experience, or answers are black and white. We're going to take a collaborative learning approach today. It's very informal, and there are no exact answers. So you might feel differently than your peers or even our presenter, Chantal, and this is all welcome. We want this to be an opportunity to focus, and hopefully you'll walk away tonight thinking about what we talked about, and it will improve your experience. Next slide. I am so glad to welcome Chantal Portillo, Spanish Oregon Certified Court Interpreter and American Translator Association Certified Spanish Translator. I know Chantal and about her accomplishments because we used to work together at the Judicial Department. I was the manager and she was a staff interpreter and a member of our translations team. While we worked together, Chantal studied for and passed the ATA, American Translator Association Spanish Certification exam. And it's a tough one, guys. I don't think she passed the first time. The ATA exam pass rate is less than 20%, and less than 2,000 individuals are certified. In Oregon, there are only 5 certified members in her language pair, English-Spanish. Chantal and I also worked together to establish our first OJD staff translation team, translators, editors, and proofreaders, and we did research to purchase translation memory software. Translation is a very difficult profession, and I know some of you are working in it, and tonight we've got one of the best right with us.
Thank you, Kelly, and I'll say it right from the start, best lady boss I ever had. Kelly had this way of making you feel you could do anything and anything was possible within your workplace, and we miss her so much. Thank you so much for having me here today. It's been really exciting to learn about the work the council does with in my conversations preparing with Kelly, and I look forward to this time that we're going to spend together.
Thanks, Chantal. And so did you pass the exam on the first time?
I did not. I took it 3 times. I was very close the 2 first times. Yeah, it took 3 tries, but you know me, I like taking tests and trying and trying.
All right, Chantal, as you know from our conversation, tonight's group is a group of third-party reviewers. Generally, they're not professional translators, a few are, and they work anonymously with the translation team. They do not know each other or their backgrounds. And this creates an interesting dynamic, especially for someone like me that sees both sides. The council reviews draft translations to ensure voters' pamphlets are accurate and culturally responsive for Oregon voters. And surprisingly, I find that most of the revisions and suggestions from the council are preference and style issues rather than cultural issues or mistranslations. So it's a good problem to have. I think it'll be interesting to explore some more today about that. So to start out, Chantal, although the council members don't serve in a translator role, can we talk a little bit about what it's like to give and receive peer feedback on translations from your experience?
Sure. Um, Receiving feedback, especially negative feedback, because we all love to receive positive feedback, it can be difficult. That is for sure. But the experience can be a positive one if the feedback is given in a professional and polite way. And also the way that we receive feedback, the openness to receive feedback, it affects that experience. So, what I like to do is I put myself in the shoes of the person that is receiving my feedback and see, is that something that I would like to hear? Or is there a way that I could say this that is more professional? Um, I always see feedback as a way to grow as a professional, but it's been a learning curve. It wasn't always, yes, tell me everything that I do wrong. I want to know. So I've learned to enjoy the learning about my mistakes. Funny story recently, two things that I've been corrected on. English is my second language. Sometimes I pronounce things funny. So in the last year, my colleagues at work have corrected my pronunciation of accurately, which I used to say accurately, and appropriate, which I used to say appropriate. My friend, my colleague at work told me, you say appropriate like a 3 year old. It was a big laugh. I was really glad they corrected me though, because those two words have to do with precision and correctness, and I was saying them wrong. Also, recently at Kelly's, we were talking and I was going to tell a story, and I said, and to end on a high note, and then I said the most depressing thing you ever heard. And I thought, I was using the idiom wrong. I was trying to use an idiom. I used it wrong. Really glad I got corrected because it was really depressing what I said after that high note. It wasn't a high note at all. So, you know, um, yes, receiving feedback can be hard, but it can also be a very positive experience, receiving it and giving
Thank you. Yeah, I see people either laughing or nodding their head. We know.
it.
So, in your work now, do you work with outside reviewers?
um, I work with outside reviewers, but not unknown to me. So my reviewers at present are people that I know very, very well. So it's a different dynamic than the one that you have in this council. I am very familiar, though, with the job that this council mainly does, which I understand is being a cultural broker uh, for those translations. Part of my thesis was to create a series of cultural tourism routes that were based on the intangible heritage of the Canary Islands. We were very isolated for most of our history, so all that intangible heritage had many terms that are unique to our islands. They don't even use them in Spain. So they were
Mm.
created in Spanish and then translated into English for our UK tourism market. And my thesis director did what you do for your translator. She was my cultural broker. She made sure that that intercultural interpretation in the translation was done adequately. She was Scottish, by the way.
Nice. Okay. So, when you think about the council and their role, what do you think the differences are between providing feedback as a member of a translation team and receiving feedback from unknown third party reviewers?
I would say the biggest difference is that you don't know who you are working with, and and that changes the working relationship, right? For example, when I started working with a peer review system for court language access services and the dynamics that Kelly helped create, it was mostly we all cooperated somewhat, but it was mostly me and another of my interpreter colleagues that did the translation work, the bulk of it. So at the beginning, we were so polite and so wordy in our suggestions. Dear Jose, I see you have used this term in this prepositional phrase using this preposition, but after checking in, blah, 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 reputable source, I have seen that it is combined. It is better to use this preposition in that. It was very wordy. It was very polite. Now we go right to the point. We just write the source and the correction. But that is because we've been working together for 5 years and know each other so well. So I think that's the biggest difference when you don't know who you're working with, the way that you have to communicate your suggestions. It has to be very, very polite and sensitive and done in a very delicate way.
Thank you. That's really interesting.
Mm.
Okay, so in preparation for tonight, I wanted to read about reviewers and what's it like. And so I started to spy or maybe lurk onto translation websites,
Mhm.
chat rooms, LinkedIn. I just Googled reviews, translations, and so on. And I found some quotes because there was this dialogue going on. And I thought that we could respond. I'd like you to respond to some of the quotes and
Okay.
I think we can learn from it. And we're going to run a couple of polls for the same time, so the council will have a chance to weigh in also. Okay, so hopefully this will work. Next slide. A good translator doesn't get hung up on words or syntax because they are able to capture the intended core message and facts.
Hmm.
All right, what do you think?
Um, I would agree if the words are the appropriate um, term equivalents for the target language and the syntax is correct. But I would say that if it's correct syntax and the translation is correct, there is no need to get hung up on different wording. Balance is key, especially when you're working in a team, because at the end of the day, is about creating a document, a translation that the target audience will understand, that is culturally appropriate, and that fits within that time cost constraints that we have when we're translating.
Okay, we have some responses. All right. Check out your peers. Um, so balance is key.
Hmm.
Sorry, I'm lost my spot here. Okay, so here's something crazy. This quote mentions syntax, and when you and I were talking, and I told you about our three categories: critical, mechanical, and preference and style, you told me that syntax should actually probably be in critical category. So I humbly accept your feedback. But can you tell us why you feel that way?
um, because syntax is grammar, and correct grammar is essential for a quality translation. So
Okay,
that's it. It's
and
not
we'll
a
be
preference. It's grammar.
okay. So we'll
Mm.
talk about mechanical and syntax a little bit later. But
Okay.
how about wording? Is it okay to prefer your own wording?
Um, it's okay to prefer, but that doesn't mean impose. And it's also okay to respect the wording of the translation if it's accurate. Um, Also, if you have a glossary, and you do for this committee, there's no need to spend time on those terms that are already in your glossary. And let me add, I was so impressed by the glossaries you've created in such a short time that are so huge, like 500 terms. It's an incredible job. Glossaries are so important for the types of translations that you work with because they have so much specialized terminology and it saves so much time, right? You've all dedicated time to choose a term after back and forth. So that is decided and done. And most importantly, when you have a glossary and you use certain terms consistently, that gives cohesion to your translations, which in turn will make the materials easier to understand for the target audience in the long run. So, super impressive, your glossaries.
Thank you. Okay, next slide. So let's talk a little bit about our mechanical category that maybe we'll be changing. Um, So we describes that as something that's inconsistent with this glossary or the style guide. Typos or typographic errors or grammatical errors. We're talking about grammar and syntax. And we describe syntax as unnatural elements or word order resulting in more than one interpretation or meaning. So, what about word order relates to syntax?
Hmm. So, syntax is the part of grammar that dictates the internal structure of a language, the way that we rearrange words in a given language so that it makes sense. And I'm sure we've all had this experience, right? We are reading a translation into our mother tongue, and all of a sudden we read a sentence and we get that feeling, oh, that looks weird, which is a valid feeling to have. I don't think it's a valid comment to make, but it is a valid feeling to have. Like I have it many times when I'm reviewing, it's like, oh, that sounds odd. And the reason that it might sound odd is maybe because there is a syntax issue. So um, maybe if you rearrange what you have just read that sounded odd, it sounds better. It sounds more natural. It flows better. So, all syntax rules are grammar, but not all grammar is syntax. Grammar includes the rules that the speakers and writers use in the creation of clauses and phrases, and it also includes phonology and morphology and phonetics and semantics. Syntax rules are only concerned with the way we arrange words. For example, my two working languages are English and Spanish, and the most common syntax is subject, verb, object. Subject, I, verb, love, object, strawberries. If I say, I strawberries love, you understand what I'm saying, but there is a small break in communication. Maybe not complete, but there is a break in communication, and we want to avoid that. And when you are translating, especially as you get tired, it is easy to start following the structure of the original too closely, which can create those unnatural flows, those, oh, that sounds weird. And I'm sure if there's any interpreters in the house, I'm sure this has happened to you as well when you get really tired. You start getting too close to the original. That can make the interpretation sound unnatural. So it's definitely something to watch out for when we are reviewing translations.
Thank you. That's a lot. And we don't expect everyone here to be linguistic uh, experts, but that's very interesting. And
Hmm.
word order matters, and sometimes it can change the meaning.
It does,
Okay,
yes.
great. Let's go to the next slide. All right, what do you guys think? Chantal, don't change anything just to prove you're doing your job.
Yes, this is a big agree, um, but it is also something that I have to pause when I am in my reviewer role, um, because you have the feeling I'm in a reviewer role. I should be, suggesting reviews or making changes to what I am reading. So, what I tend to ask myself is this an accurate translation? Is this communicating what the original is communicating? Is it conveying the same meaning and intent as the English into the non English language? Is it grammatically correct? Um, is it offending or confusing local readers? If all those things are off my list, then it's just a style preference. And I have many. As a linguist and as anyone that works with languages, I have many preferences in style and in wording, but I'm also very big on efficiency. And for and review to be efficient, you need to comply with certain things, which is being fast and being productive. And Kelly has told me about your time constraints. They are big, so I imagine you don't have a lot of time for rewording things that are already correct. So yes, it's difficult, but if there's nothing to change, then even better.
Okay, I see some nodding heads, and it looks like a lot of people are agreeing on that one. Feel free to go ahead and vote on the polls. And so what I'm hearing is it's kind of like the English saying, if it ain't broke, don't fix it, right?
Yes.
But I can get stuck into a little bit of a perfectionist mode, which really slows me down. It's hard to let go. What do you think?
It is. And I am also a perfectionist, but
Yes,
I
you
had
are.
to learn I had to learn early in my translation career that if I wanted to work as a translator, it also had to be cost efficient. In an ideal world, we would have all the time that we needed or that we wished we had to do a translation and then review it and then let it rest and then review it and let it rest because you can always say things better or say things more beautifully. But when I worked for the private sector, and I still do some work for the private sector, the deadline is always yesterday. I don't know why. When people need a translation, it's always yesterday. So, so I had to learn to be efficient. I had to learn to focus in my reviews on mistranslations, grammar errors. And if I had time, which you never do, then move on to my style and wording preferences. But I tend to leave those to the end and take care of the things that I consider make up a quality translation.
Inexperienced Inexperienced reviewers often want to make more changes than necessary. They can end up changing perfectly good text simply because they would say it differently. I'm going to launch this poll if I can get there.
Um, this rings true, but it would also ring true with experienced and eliminating that inexperienced word as well, just reviewers. And I include myself. Um, yes. And let me answer the poll.
You're going to, oh,
So,
because it's
so I
over
can see the
your
slide.
screen.
Yes,
Sorry.
no, that's okay. So, it, and I think it happens more when you are in separate teams. That I think reviewers when they work in separate teams and they're translators when you are physically separated or just don't know each other. I think there's a tendency to make more corrections, but I think that as a reviewer, the best policy, at least what I do, is I don't look for things to correct. I just make everything is correct. And that saves me a lot of time.
Okay. Yeah. And one comment that I read also that I didn't put here was that actually sometimes reviews can insert errors into the translation, which is something we want to avoid too. Okay, we got a nice mixed response on that one. Sort of, but is a good answer. Um, all right, let's have another one. Next slide. Oh, I see. Did the last question launch? I don't think it did. I'm going to hit again. Inexperienced
There you go.
reviewers
There you
often
go.
want to make more changes. All right, we'll let people vote. Sorry about that. And I guess it was user error on the other one too.
And regarding the comment that you can introduce errors, that can happen because maybe you rewrite your sentence that you would prefer to say in a different way. But then that sentence was coordinated with the previous and the next sentence, and that rewrite didn't integrate the three sentences. So now you've created a lack of cohesion. So it can happen. Or maybe it's a typo because your finger just went bloop. So it can happen when you're rewriting that new errors might be introduced.
Okay. Did that one work?
I believe so. I voted.
Nods. It says it's live.
Okay.
Okay, great. Um, So yes, and I'd like to say that although we're not a part of the paid translation team, we're part of the team. The council makes a very important part, and actually, a lot of other agencies and places have contacted me with interest about adding third-party reviewers to their agency translations process.
And I will say now, I wanted to join this council so much when the volunteers positions came out. I sent all my paperwork right away, and I was on pins and needles biting my nails, hoping that I would get chosen. And I didn't because I thought providing linguistic access to voting, that is up there with linguistic access to justice. It is so important. Everyone has to be so proud to be part. I mean, obviously, you're super proud because I just saw that 9 people were continuing their 3-year dedication. So, yeah, it's such an amazing job that you're doing here. It's something to be so proud of.
Aw, thank you. And I have to tell everyone she's a fabulous candidate, but our secretary was very dedicated to having a diverse group and rural representation, and we were able to do that with some of our Spanish members. So I'm sorry, Chantal.
I know.
Okay, next slide. All right. If you feel something has been translated especially well, say so.
Yes, this is a big yes. Um, when you are receiving feedback, it is very nice to hear that someone that has reviewed your work and spent time reading whatever it is, your translation or hearing your presentation, thinks that you've done something well. I take every opportunity I can to congratulate my colleague Jose, whom I work in peer reviews with now very closely, to tell him that translation was beautiful, or maybe he thinks of a term that I hadn't thought about for a certain thing, and I can even start using whatever he chose that I was impressed by. Or maybe it was a very entangled sentence in English, and he was able to translate it and make it clearer without changing the tone and without changing the register. So definitely, when you see something you like, I always say it. I think it makes your translator and reviewer team proud, and it creates a good work environment, right? Because feedback is usually negative, but when you see something positive, it's like, it just makes your day. so, so that's a big yes for me.
Definitely. Marcy, you want to click once? We've got a way to say that. So here's a way to express that. The translation is accurate and flows naturally. Good job. But you can add that there's a couple of mistakes related to abbreviations by our style guide.
Mhm.
I love to pass along positive feedback from the council to our translation vendor. Thank you. All right, we've got a next one. Next slide. Reviewers should only be allowed to suggest revisions that they see as unnatural or unclear.
I imagine this unnatural and unclear includes mistranslations and grammatical errors and syntax errors. So it might be an unpopular opinion, but I I agree if that is included in that unnatural and unclear. Um, because I like to respect the translator's work, whichever style and choices they have made, if they are accurate. In an ideal world, we would have, again, endless time to go back and forth and share and our points of view. But the timelines are always very, very narrow. There's also budget constraints, and I know that this group is a group of volunteers, so you specifically don't have budget constraints, but the translators and reviewers you work with do have their also budget constraints. So in in the spirit of keeping your deadlines, I and again, to be efficient, what I do is I go to mistranslations and grammatical and syntax errors, and try to limit my style preferences for the time that I have left, which is usually none.
Okay. Yeah, for me, it's the word only that trips me up. There's always
Mm.
reasons. And I think
Yes.
I see nodding on that one. I'm going to clear my throat. Yes, and we've talked about this before. In our council, we have a lot of different backgrounds. And so different style preferences are going to be based on educational background, number of years speaking English or the other language, life experiences in Oregon or the United States, maybe formal education in writing the target languages, or experience with elections and the subject matter expertise. Cultural values, we have a broad generational representation on the council, and all kinds of other cultural and identity issues are going to impact preferences and styles. So appreciate that. All right, so no surprise here. Feedback should be concise, structured, and clear. As Chantal said, to be on the receiving end, it has to be helpful, to be a real useful and a professional experience. And we worked pretty hard to develop our review form, and I think it's been working well, but we periodically, we take comments on it, and we did a survey a while back to update categories, and we'll be continuing to do that. Thank you for your input. So we want to think about what happens when it goes a little bit haywire and the feedback isn't especially concise or structured or useful. So next slide. All right, no one would ever do this in this room. I know. Wrong. But we do get comments sometimes that are less helpful, and we would like to be more concise and provide some direction. So Chantal, what's your reaction to some of these?
No. It's my first feeling. It's like, no. Yes. For me, this would be a no because it feels more like a personal attack than an evaluation of my work. Also, those comments are very broad and they don't provide a solution to the negative, which is something that makes a comment very, very valuable when you are reviewing. If you provide what you think is the correct translation or what you could think is the grammar correction that needs to be made. So, um, yes, those are comments that I wouldn't like to receive myself, or I wouldn't give to my colleagues.
I had to start with the worst just to be.
Oh, yes.
We can get to
Those
the
are
best.
pretty bad.
But yeah, Marcy, we got a couple clicks there of different ways to say that. The original means X, but the translation means Y, would be a way to give some feedback. Or I interpret the intended meaning to be Y. Okay. All right, next slide. It sounds weird. Council, what would be something better to express it sounds weird that would be useful? Go ahead and write anything you'd like to that question in the chat, and we'll give you a minute to think.
And like I said, it's a valid feeling because when you are reading in your mother tongue and it's from a translation, sometimes it does sound weird, but it's not a very constructive comment.
Syntax is not standard. That's a great one.
Another way to phrase this, I like that. Yes.
Great.
Would sound more natural. Yes. This wording is not commonly used. That one is more common. Yes, see, you're providing solutions. You're not only pointing out what you perceive as incorrect, but providing a solution, and that really gives weight to a review comment.
Great. Okay, so yeah, we're not using that phrase. Next slide. It sounds like Google Translate. Everyone's laughing and oh my gosh. Ouch.
Yes. I wouldn't like to
So
receive that comment,
why not?
which
No,
doesn't mean why not? Well, it
it's
again,
not
it feels
professional.
yeah, it's not professional. It feels a little bit like a personal attack more than again a constructive comment on the work that you're doing. I always try to really focus on the work and not make it sound personal. I think that makes people that are receiving the comment much more open to your comment than if it feels like a personal attack.
Yeah. Okay. But Chantal, what if it really does sound like Google Translate or a machine translation? Because
Uh-huh.
it happens. What about that?
Yes. Well, if it does sound like machine translation, I would ask myself, and that's very easy to check because you can just put it in Google Translate and see if that's how it comes out. But I would ask myself, why does it sound like a Google Translate? Is it because the translation used a term that is a correct equivalent but is incorrect for this context? Or is it because the machine used syntax that is not natural, that doesn't follow the syntax norms of the language that I am working with? So I would ask myself why, and then I would provide the correct non-Google Translate sounding option.
Hmm. Okay. And question: have there been instances of translators using Google Translate? I don't know. I have had some concerns about maybe machine translation. And so, in all seriousness, if you have that, we would love to pass along that feedback to our vendor because that's not the translation team that we want. But what's more difficult is if you can give it to us with some um, concise examples or reasons why you believe it. So I think one of the things I see with Google Translate is it's often out of context. It's a word
Hmm.
that doesn't quite fit there, and so yes, it's not a huge problem, um, but give us something we can use. When that happens. Okay. All right. Yes, we've got some great comments there. People who work in this. Thank you. Okay, next slide. Oh, here's a quote.
It's me.
I have never met a translator that felt like they had ample time to work on a project as to go back and forth between one wording or the other. And if they do, then it becomes a non-profitable project. Chantal Portillo. Um, so yeah, translators are time is important to them, and reviewers it's important to them. So um, we have these crazy deadlines.
Yes, and I have colleagues that are excellent translators, but they can't let go of certain things. And doing translation is not efficient for them because it is their job. They have to make money and they have to pay bills with it. And they are too perfectionist and they just go over and over their work so much that at the end of the day, they do something else or they take very few translation projects because it's not cost efficient to them.
So they just know that their personality is such that they can't. It's got to, yeah. Okay.
Can't
I
can't be their
understand that.
only source of income.
Yes, yes. Mars and I was changing this PowerPoint up to 5:30 probably, giving Marcia a heart attack because I can't let it go. Okay. So we want the reviews to be pleasant for everyone, educational, fun. Should I say fun? But worthwhile and meaningful projects. So
Mhm.
we would like you to be able to decide where to best spend your time and um, use your time wisely because we have a lot of material, a lot of repeat material.
Yes, and as I understand, the main role of this committee is to be a cultural broker, correct? Make sure that the translations are, um, apart from accurate, that that they fit the target population here in Oregon, being culturally that they're localized basically for your target population in the state of Oregon.
Hmm. Yeah, I think the authors of the law were really focused on the cultural, but there is a lot of complex information, and you've seen the voters pamphlets. They're very
Yes.
long, and it can kind of be a catch-22, what deserves the most attention when Kelly Mills has told you you have 72 hours to send them back. So it's important to consider the time.
Yes, 10 constraints are so tight for this committee. It's and it's during your weekends mostly, right? Is
That's
that
right.
how you
Hopefully. I try.
hopefully.
Hmm.
Yes, and adding third-party reviewers and analyzing those suggestions and then applying all that to the final drafts. Yes, I can see how it can complicate the translation process of your materials.
Yes, yes, definitely. Election laws and timelines were not written with translations and certainly not for council reviews in mind, that time
Hmm.
built in. But I know that our translations are high quality because of the council.
Yes, they are. Again, you can be so proud of what you do, and I wish I was part of this council. Just saying it again. It's
Okay. What's worth fighting for, Chantal? I mean, it's kind of confusing. It's a catch-22. What is priority? What's the hill you want to die on?
for me, what's worth fighting for again is inaccuracies. If the translation doesn't capture what the original is saying, direct mistranslations, that's always worth fighting for. Grammatical and syntax errors, that is always worth fighting for. Um, yes, but you have to adapt to time constraints, and then the rest of the team that works with you has to adapt also to budget constraints. So as long as the translation is accurate meaning, preserves the tone and style, and it is culturally appropriate, I always consider the rest to be preferences of mine, which again, I have so many. But but yes, I try to that's not what's worth dying for.
Okay. Yeah. So I know this is a conflict for some of our members. Um, and we often give in the larger elections some directive like focus on the state pamphlet or things like that. We've also gotten better at dividing things up and
Hmm.
spreading things among many people. Okay, next slide. Giving weight to feedback. So as I mentioned, we had a survey about the review form recently. I guess it was last spring. We were looking to improve it and ask for some ideas. And some of the feedback we got was members or someone was concerned that if they didn't mark something as critical, that it would get less attention from the translation team, or it would be minimized or just skipped over, or even
Hmm.
preference and style would be skipped over. And that wasn't the intention of those. Um, but would you gloss over that kind of feedback if it wasn't categorized as critical?
No. Um, as a translator receiving feedback, if there's a grammatical error, I want to know about it. If there's a syntax error, I want to know. I think it's just because the word critical sounds so critical that maybe that is why. But whatever you call it, critical or mechanical error, I think any translator would pay close attention to all comments, independently of how they are categorized.
Yeah, and that's from my where I sit when I see the reviews come in and I see them come back. Um,
Hmm.
I can definitely say 100% that all of the time that took to give some feedback is considered, definitely. So yeah, maybe we need to rename these. What was the one we used to have? We had critical minor, I think, and that certainly didn't work. So they're all valuable and they all carry weight. So don't worry about that. All right, next slide. Doing great on time, by the way. All right, so here we are in Oregon. Am I frozen? Or the next slide,
Nope.
frozen? Oh, there it is.
There we
Okay, great. Okay, you mentioned localization, and
go. Hmm.
Catalina's tried to explain this to me several times. Um, Marketing and branding and localizing, and I've read and heard about it, but I'm going to ask you again to weigh in. And election material is difficult. It's very specialized and it's difficult for even native speakers. So
Hmm.
we're talking about decriminalization of drugs. Here's one: behavioral health facilitation through the supervised use of psychedelic drug compounds. Um,
Hmm.
that was last general election. And, I think can we just call it magic mushrooms? Well, no, we can't, but that's what they are. And land use zoning and the difference between an optional obligation debt bond and so on. And so we've been wrangling with a lot of those terms. It's difficult and it's very specialized. Um, do you think culturally appropriate translation should include adding information uh, to explain things that isn't there for the English reader?
So it depends, and this more or less will answer that question that we got at the beginning. So if there is an
Okay.
equivalent term in the non-English language for that English term, it is always preferred to use that equivalent term. Um, because that is richness of language. If we start just using English for many words in our own language, then we lose that diversity of our language, right? So if there's an equivalent term, I would say use it. But sometimes there are no equivalent terms. Sometimes it is a cultural concept that doesn't exist in the non English culture. In that case, what you need to do, Levi, yes. In that case, there's different methods that you can use. You can provide a brief description of whichever term. You can use the English and a brief description in parentheses. But whatever you do, it has to be very brief, because, as you said, elections are confusing. Election materials are confusing. They should be as confusing for English speakers as for the rest of us. And it's like going to court. And English speakers are confused in court, just like the people I interpret for my court users with limited English proficiency. It is not my job when the counsel is speaking with their client and they're using all these legalese and these complex sentences and complex concepts to lower their register so that person I'm interpreting for can understand. We all have to be on equal footing and just as confused when voting or when in court. So I hope that answers the question.
Well, that's pretty tidy. I think it's more complicated, but okay. Uh, I've also been learning about transcreation. I think Catalina was schooling me on that, but you know, sometimes the words don't exist. And so this
Hmm.
is really important for us to think about how to best convey the meaning. And this is an opportunity for people to send in ideas about our style guide if we want some kind of uniformity and when we deal with those things. And we can think about that. And our information in the voters pamphlets is official government information. And so also by default, it's educational too: how to register,
Hmm.
how to vote, your rights as a voter. Um, but we are trying to follow the philosophy and hold relatively firm that we aren't inadvertently making a special cultural voting guide for a particular community. That would be a
Yeah.
different kind of project than translating the
Hmm.
English voters pamphlet. So we want it to be equitable in all languages, even English. Um, so the other thing that I wanted to give guidance to the council is plain language or difficult English that could be improved. If we can improve the English source text, please send it in when you're working on things. We don't have control, for example, over what the county clerk will put into their county pamphlet, but we can certainly pass along information and or feedback, positive and
Hmm.
constructive feedback. And also there's opportunities like, oh, my cat's here. Oh, Lucy. So yeah, last summer you were all working on the voters registration cards, and they're being redesigned. That's my cat. Um, and we got some feedback about driver's permit, for example. Um, Actually, it didn't say that. It said when an acceptable idea is identification is a permit, and it was pointed out that newcomers may not know that permit means an instructional or provisional driver's license, and so
Mm-hmm.
we passed that along to the voter registration card committee. So please let us know, and we will do our best. Okay, and you did mention localization a little bit earlier. You just say a few more words about that?
Sure. So translation is the process of converting text into from one language to another, focusing on the message, adapting that message while maintaining accuracy. Localization goes beyond translation and adapts the, excuse me, the entire product to a specific locale or target market. And it's easy to understand with this example. Imagine you are translating a recipe and the English, and it's English to Spanish for Spain. And the English reads, cook 2 pounds of cherries at 150 degrees Fahrenheit. I'm going to translate in English, so imagine I'm saying it in Spanish. To localize it, we would say, cook 1 kilo of cherries at 65.5 degrees Celsius. So there you have localized those pounds and that Fahrenheit into the measures that are used in Spain. So that's localization. You're muted, Kelly.
Thank you, because I'm worried about my cat. So in Oregon, we're working with communities that speak languages other than English as their first language. And we work through some, I don't know if this is called localization, with the Vietnamese reviewers. For example, the translation team must be based out of California for Vietnamese, and they kept
Mm-hmm.
providing a Department of Motor Vehicles translation, the name of the agency, as they did it in California. And
Mm-hmm.
our faithful Vietnamese reviewers didn't give up and said that just wasn't kosher. We weren't using that term in Oregon. And in fact, the other term seemed a little archaic. So that was definitely some cultural appropriateness for Oregon, as well as probably some localization. Okay.
Yes, that was localization.
Oh, I got it right then. Okay.
Mm-hmm.
Um, so how could we communicate when there's something very specific to Oregon or speakers in Oregon of a particular language?
um, you can say things like the name of this agency is translated as such in the state of Oregon, or the target community for these materials in Oregon uses or is used to seeing this translated as
Mhm.
such.
Thank you.
Mm,
Yeah, we put one up there. This term is most commonly translated as X in Oregon. I've also seen
mm,
some great comments that say something along the lines of, for the Oregon Ukrainian speaking community, this is uh, better understood or more commonly used in Oregon
yes.
government
Mm-hmm.
materials, things like that. So very good.
Mm.
Okay, next slide. Okay, so we've got some more kind of practice. We hope you can participate. There are no right or wrong answers here, but these are our three categories. And you'll remember critical is going to be offensive, culturally inappropriate, or really a mistranslation and the meaning is wrong. Wrong. Um, Ouch. And then mechanical, we talked about that, glossary and style guide inconsistency, grammar errors, typos, or syntax about word order, um, resulting in more than one interpretation of meaning. So holding close to the meaning. And then preference and style is synonymous, non-glossary terms, or preferred word order, which doesn't affect the meaning. And of course, we could go on and make those really long, but those are the basics. So we're going to work on that. Also, I wanted to mention there was a nice comment a little bit a while ago that the meaning, a different meaning than the English intent, making sure also that it meets the intention of election laws and processes in Oregon. So sometimes the translation might be correct, but it doesn't quite work for elections in Oregon. So that's something else. I would call that critical, but again, we'll weigh all of it. Okay, so get your chat ready. You're going to be typing in what you think some of these are. Let's go to the next slide. Council. Leave Oregon untranslated per style guide. What category do you think that is? Again, there's no right or wrong answers, and the categories are relatively broad. So don't be concerned that there's a black and white answer here. Okay, let's do a next one. We're going to move through these. Suggest changing to use this Chinese character. Otherwise, the translation has a negative connotation, almost suggesting torture. Oh, let's torture the voters. Definitely cultural there. Okay, lots of agreement. How about the next one? A cast ballot is a noun, not a verb. To cast a ballot. You categorize that one. And I don't like that word, by the way. I wish we didn't have to have it in our glossary. Okay, it's all over the map here. Nouns and verbs makes a difference. Okay, here's one. This is a more inclusive and respectful way to describe people with visual disabilities. Not everyone is has evolved in some of the terminology. And inclusive and equitable language. Very interesting. Okay. Got some details there. Here's another one. Preferred synonym is, and I can't pronounce it, Vietnamese words, Trin Bang. Are you playing too, Chantal?
I am not. He was taking a little break.
Gotcha.
I am reading the answers, though.
The Oregon community will be confused by translated term. That old example of drivers. Well, I don't even say drivers. Permit. Yeah, I can see that there's a lot of interpretations. Okay, I prefer this word order for natural flow. We do this now so you stay awake. Wow, that one's all over the map too. All right, this sounds more natural to me. And Voice of America uses this term too. So Voice of America is a US government, I guess it's a internet and radio networks around the world to have sympathy to the American foreign policies. Okay, the meaning here is 21 days before the election is the ultimate date, not the minimum date. Have had that one come up in one language. You can turn in your ballot until 8 o'clock on election night. Does not mean the day before. Okay. And we're moving right along. I hope you enjoyed that. Again, it's just food for thought and ways you can say things and what they might go with. All right, we'll do a couple, just a little bit of final talk about language authorities. Chantal, you want to tell us about those and why they're important?
Sure. So, language authorities is what I've called tonight reputable sources or renowned sources. They are also called language academies, and they are the entities whose mission is to arbitrate, unify, and promote the correct usage of language. So, languages are evolving beings, languages are alive, just like people, and they change throughout time. And language academies um, take maintain record of the evolution of language, and again, they also arbitrate and unify and promote correct usage of language. And most languages have a language authority. For Spanish, we have La Real Academia Española, the Royal Academy of Spanish. We have the Institute of Linguistics of Vietnam for the Social Sciences, the Russian Language Institute, the Académie Française for the
Oh my
French
gosh,
Academy. So
you added to your list.
most languages have a language authority that regulates that language.
Okay, yeah, you named a lot there. I want to check into those for our style guide. And that's to
Hmm.
say that, if it comes down to the translation team and a reviewer really disagreeing on whether something should be capitalized or something,
Hmm.
we really need to go back to, an authority on grammar rules for that language. And so I would love people's suggestions for their languages we can add to the style guide because it's kind of an agreement we have with the vendor. Um, they don't have to put anything in that's not grammatically correct, even if it was suggested. And if we need to, we'll work it out and figure out the language authority on it. So it's not the last word, but um, it's very helpful. So we
It
did
gives a
so
lot of
well.
weight
Mhm.
to it gives a lot of weight to your revisions when you are able to use a language authority.
Yes, it does. But you got to keep that time factor in your head too. Not
Always.
a lot of time to do research, and I wouldn't expect people to spend a lot of time
Hmm.
researching. But it is very helpful to provide some rationale and legitimate resources. Great. I saw a comment here. I'll start. I saw a comment in the chat that Google Translate's getting a lot better.
It sure
What do you
is.
think?
I completely agree. When I started translating 20 years ago, Google Translate was terrible. It is not anymore. It is actually pretty good. And in fact, my nephew, who is now 14, he was starting to think of what do I want to be when I grow up. I told him not a translator because in 20, 40 years, I don't know. I think editors and reviewers are always going to be essential for translation, but I think it's already started happening. Um, there's more translation done by machine translation, especially certain types of texts, that are not literary, that are more scientific, more mechanical to translate. And they just use reviewers and editors and proofreaders instead of the whole
Hmm.
team. So yes.
Yeah. And those translation chat rooms and the LinkedIn and those groups that I found, tons of conversation about AI. I know there's some questions about that and
Mhm.
the future. It's kind of scary. I said I'll retire before we go that way. Okay, Tatiana has her hand up. What do you have
Mhm.
tonight, Tatiana?
Yeah, I sometimes find that the translation doesn't sound right, but I don't have a better suggestion, like
Mhm.
caucus, for example. And
Mhm.
sometimes I just write quickly, needs work, meaning for me and for the translator. And I'm trying to find, is there a better way, quickly, briefly, to say, doesn't sound right, but I have not a better idea.
So for my language pair, English Spanish, when I am reading a translation and I come up to a term and I am not sure if it should be this one that is used in the translation or the one that I prefer, I just write in Google, for example, X versus Y, and then next to it, I write Fundeu, which is one of our language authorities for Spanish, and usually something comes up, and it gives me the solution of why one would be better over the other. Um, so getting crafty with Google searches can help.
Yeah, I think Tatiana's pretty good at that one. um, but yeah, I think too, it would be okay. I mean, sometimes we'll just, again, every bit of feedback that you write, I know that they look at. And I have seen some that said, oh, try it again, or something's not quite right, but I don't know what it is. And the translation team always comes back. They try it again, basically. So,
Mm-hmm.
hey, Lowell, do you have a general question for us? Oh, did I lose Lowell? Oh, there he
And I
is.
just,
Yeah, just a
okay.
comment, just maybe. Sorry, I for some of our reviews. I mean, and Kelly knows sometimes my reviews are late, and I'm sorry to the translation to the team that sometimes they're late because sometimes for my language, I want to make sure that the readers that are reading the language are getting the perfect translation that they get, and sometimes the translations are sloppy, and I make honest reviews when I'm doing the reviews, and if I don't like it, I'll put it in the comment and put in my suggestion in the reviews.
Thank you for that comment, Lowell. Yeah, you did say the word perfect, so I'm not, nobody's trying to attain that, but I appreciate that. And the pressures, again, of the timeline is really challenging. So
Uh,
we're with you.
uh,
We're with you.
can I maybe? Oh, sorry, Kelly. I think
Yes.
sometimes the translator's rushing, but they do they're probably rushing sometimes when they're doing the projects, but they have it. They're there. So sometimes I'm just putting when I'm doing the review, just suggesting the words that they should have used. No.
Great. Okay. You have any hands up?
There are several questions in the chat.
Okay. Let's get a couple there. Yes, Catalina, if you send in something about Spanish translations, please go ahead and send it in and we will gather the response. If you say something like, this sounds a little awkward, but then go on to explain how, and then also suggestion for what to change it to, is it as not great?
Um,
So Renee, I'm not quite understanding that question.
I think I understood it.
Mhm.
I think if you can eliminate it sounds awkward and give everything the rest of your feedback and what you're trying to get across will get across. I think that's what she meant. If
Renee, are you good on that one or not?
Yeah, I just meant like I think sometimes like it I don't know, like I'm just like puzzling over a sentence and I'm like it really sounds awkward and like
Mhm.
I do my best to like not say it like that, but so I like add in like a little awkward just
Mhm.
to kind of supplement, but I like yeah, so I think it's like in situations like those, like is it
Mhm.
okay to just like say that? But then like as long as like you're going over and explaining like why it sounds like that and like giving suggestions like
Mhm.
is it still okay to do that?
Hmm. Again, I would look. Why does it sound awkward? So and it's a valid feeling, Renee. I get it. I get that feeling a lot. I bet anyone that reviews multiple times throughout their review get the feeling that sounds weird. But what I do is, why does it sound weird? Is it because they used a word that my community doesn't use? Is it because the syntax, the order of the words is unnatural? So yes, valid feeling, but I try to include in the comment the why, and then the most important part, how I would say it, or where or which term I would prefer in that context. That really gives weight to the revision.
Great. These are good. How about, would it be fair to summarize that perfection in translation is not necessary and good enough is enough?
Well, I would say perfection in life is almost impossible. And it's just that there's so many ways to say the same thing, right? And it depends. And what Kelly mentioned before, diversity will give so many perspectives to the way that we can say something. Um, as long as the translation is accurate, respects style and respects tone, and it is culturally appropriate, those are good building blocks. I bet you can always make something sound prettier if you work on it over and over and over. Um, I get that feeling. Oh, I could make this sound better, but sometimes you just don't have the time.
Yeah, I'm thinking of something. I think I went to a management class once. It was the 80-20 principle. Prioritize 80% of your work that will have the biggest impact. And, I'm not quoting it very well, but 20% you can minimize or not spend as much priority on it to do a pretty darn good job. And so that's not in translation, but maybe that kind of concept.
Hmm. No need to be super poetic. Yes, you need to be informative and clear and accurate. Yes.
Okay, here's one. I have never heard of this. Do you know about DeepL? DEEPL, DeepL Translate. What do you think of
I
it?
believe it's software, translation software, I believe. I haven't used it. I've only used MemoQ and Trados, and so I don't know DeepL. I believe it's translation software.
Okay. Anyone knows a lot about that?
Mm-hmm.
Okay. And it is interesting. I just want to say it's very interesting, these translation groups that I went out and found, and we'll get to Jing next, very Western European and Spanish generally. I don't know what region, and then Eastern European translators are very active. But I kept wondering, where are the Asian language translators in these groups? It seems like they weren't in these conversations, so I don't know where they are kind of collaborating with their peers. It's kind of interesting, and it made me think of DeepL. It sounds like it's somewhat culturally or language more specific than Google, for example.
Mm-hmm. Doesn't have Tagalog Filipino.
Jing, I bet you want to say something.
Oh yeah, I raised that question about DeepL. So from my limited experience, I think for Chinese, DeepL works better than Google. Yeah,
Mm,
I'm
okay.
just asking for your ideas. And sorry, I
Mhm.
turned off my mic, which I just realized. I hope I didn't make any noise. And one more word
You didn't.
about perfection. I try to make the translation better, probably not perfect, because I think it's the state government election material. So I think I'm expecting a higher standard of translation. And
Mhm.
a lot of times I think of the people we serve are people I do on-site interpreting, so I meet a lot of LEP people. So I always think, oh, they understand this. It's not just English; it's also the education background information and people from a different system. So
Mhm.
that's all what I wanted to say. Thank you.
Yes. And I really appreciate that. We all do that. The translations reflect on the agency. They reflect on every county and elected officials and appointed officials. And so there's nothing here that I hope the message isn't that we're minimizing the accuracy or the quality. So, but
Mhm.
so thankful for all of your work.
David
Hey,
had a question before. David,
yeah.
would you repeat your question, please?
Me?
Yes, please.
I mean,
Tagalish.
Chantal already answered, pretty well answered it earlier. My question was about when English words get passed straight through from the English into the translation. And very often, and what I got from Chantal was that if there is a Tagalog equivalent, then we should go with the Tagalog equivalent. So I'll make sure in my reviews to tell the translators not to be lazy about it.
Yes.
Don't use the word lazy, please.
I won't, but
Politely,
Um,
respectfully.
Yes, and also there are a couple languages, the Tagalog and Marshallese in our style guide, where we said there might be more exceptions to English loanwords, or I don't even know if they are called loanwords, because my understanding is that because of the colonization and settlers and things like that, a lot of them have been incorporated as the true blue language. And by the way, Marshallese is not in Google Translate. I bet Lowell already knows that. So yeah, there's another angle there. Okay, we've got a question for Chantal. When can you use the whole meaning instead of word by word translation? Yes, that's a hard one, especially with some of the selection material.
When can you use the whole meaning instead of word? I think we should always use the whole meaning, because word per word translation will result in what I was talking about when you follow the structure of the original too close, and it creates a break in communication. So what I do when I translate is I read the sentence, and then I look elsewhere and I translate it. So I don't translate together with the English. I try to separate myself, understand what I'm reading, and provide my Spanish translation. So I would say always. It's always it's best to go by meaning than word per word translation.
Yeah, and we've all read some of those on packages and things that come from Amazon. You open it up and you're like, what? Yeah, that's actually word for word, but it's not what it means. Okay.
And when I made my comment about Google Translate being good, that was based on my language pair, English, Spanish. So I am sure that many of the languages this committee works with, Google Translate is not good. But with English and Spanish, it's pretty good.
And we have a comment from Loie, and I would like to point out I worked with Loie also at the Judicial Department, and she is one of the fabulous and small population who are ATA certified also as a German translator, Loie. The opposite can also be true with English loanwords. For example, they look like English, but there's nonetheless a difference in meaning or even structure. So I think have people experienced that as well. Lovely.
So this is Mira Weimer. I'm a Korean interpreter or translator.
Yes.
And I like to give credit to Korean translators. Give lots of credits. They've been doing a really good job. I think at the beginning when I first joined the Translation Advisory Council, it was a little bit like I think I need to put in more time and work when I review the materials, but I think over the years they become so good I don't have to do as much work put in. So I really like to give them a credit. But there's one thing I like to ask question about to Chantal. So when it comes to loan words, like by the way, the Korean has got the different word order from English. It's almost the opposite, so it's not always easy. But I think the Korean translator did really good job. But there's when it comes to the loan words, I was wondering which would be better, like stay close to how your community pronounce it or say it, or I'm talking about the romanization of the loan words. For example, Oregon, this translator keep translate Oregon, but that's not how we say it in Korean. In Korean community, we say Oregon.
Mm-hmm.
So I was a little bit confused. Do we need to like choose the one that's more widely accepted in our community, or do we need to choose the one that sounds more close to the native speakers' pronunciation?
Excellent.
I would say check your language academy and see, or your dictionary, English, Korean, and see if that is translated in that dictionary. I know that this is a big issue of content of discussion between Spanish translators. Some prefer to use Oregon in English, others prefer to use Oregon with the accent mark in Spanish. So reputable source and check there, see if that is actually, if there's an official translation, and that can solve a lot of decision making.
Excellent. Yeah, and I wrote a little comment about the style guide. Again, that's an evolving person, as Chantal calls translations. They're evolving. And right now we're directing the translators to leave names of addresses, locations, and so on in English. So Oregon would be one. And the reason is because this is a written voters pamphlet that sometimes the ballots are not translated, for example. So we want them to be able to match things, or if they want to look up a campaign committee online, they want to be able to match the name of the Oregon committee to make that connection. But yeah, we're open to ideas, and we're always thinking of the end user, what would be the best for their voting experience.
And usually you wouldn't translate addresses, so that is a very good way to proceed.
Thank you. Yeah, we're learning as we go, and we need everyone's input. Marcia, could you flip back to the break slide, which had the dates on it? And I just want to make sure everyone catches that. You're going to be hearing from us soon. We will be working on the May election materials beginning next week. And we are going to use file share as before. So that's where you get an email with a link and you download the files that you're going to review. You don't rename them, and you do your review, and then you get a link to send them back to us. And it seems to be an efficient, secure way to send things back and forth. Multnomah County has, they print some of the translations. If you live there, you've seen those in the mail. And so they have an earlier timeline. They have staff who review Vietnamese and Spanish for us of their own pamphlets. And then we have Chinese, Russian, and Korean reviewers from the council look at those. So that's coming up next week, as well as everyone, most everyone should be getting some reviews of state and county general voter information. And these things are typically over about 3 days, and they're not all on weekends this time. It's a big election, and there's a lot of material coming in. Ukrainian too, Marcia said, for Multnomah. And then something in the statewide elections, like the primary and general, is that filers can submit their own translations, which can be pretty interesting. And our council has the role of reviewing those to make sure that the English and the translation have the same meaning, and that the meaning wasn't changed or things weren't added or omitted from the English translation. So I can't tell you if you're going to get those or not, but we will have a few of those probably floating through in some of the more, probably some of the top 5 languages and maybe some others too. Then we're into April. State ballot measures are going to come back and county ballot measures. And then we really appreciate people who are available during the production week for the online pamphlet, who could check formatting and make sure that we didn't like chop up a word or do something inadvertently while putting it on the website. Okay.
Kelly,
Tamara.
if I may suggest that we include these timelines into our follow-up email so that everybody have these dates handy.
Yes, and I typically send out an email saying, hey, I'm going to be sending something to you next week. Alert, alert. So
Yeah,
definitely. Okay. I think we're ready to close. Tamara, you want to do closing tonight?
Sure. Well, thank you very much, Chantal and Kelly, for putting this training together. It's much needed, and for me personally, there was a lot of food for thought, and I hope that council members share this feeling. And I also want to thank council members for active participation in those polls and asking questions. I'm sure there will be more questions as you digest the information that you've heard today. And special thanks to Chantal, who shared her tremendous experience, and it was extremely helpful, especially considering that we'll have to do a lot of reviews in the next few months. What I would suggest, what really struck me from what Chantal was saying, that if there's a remarkable translation that you really like, don't hesitate to say so. So I want to suggest a change to the review form, because really there were cases when I could give a standing ovation to a brilliant translation. So if there is a checkbox for that, I would definitely use it every now and then.
And a checkbox makes it more efficient. Click.
There you go. Thank you so
Yeah.
much for having me tonight. Again, what you do is so incredibly important. I wish it was part of this committee. I bet it was a pleasure to be able to share this time with you. Who knows, maybe someday I will be
Keep
part of the
applying.
community.
Yeah,
Learning
keep
something over.
all applications stay on file.
Yes.
All right.
Okay,
Thank
good.
you.
Yeah.
We did a great job on time, and thank you again.
Thank
So
you,
we
See.
covered the
everyone.
entire agenda for now. For the next meeting, it will be most likely an in-person meeting sometime in summer. And in the follow-up email, or maybe a little bit later, we will send out a little poll to check everybody's availability for an in-person meeting like the one we had last summer. And well, thanks again for your very active participation, and see you in a few months.
Great. And congratulations, Renee and Angelo.
Yes.
See you guys in July.
Bye, everyone.
Bye-bye.